Hello and welcome to today's readiness course. Hopefully you all had a good and wonderful and certainly restful weekend. I know that I did. My name is Mark Flores. I haven't taught any courses this cycle yet, but I am an implementation consultant here with Team Dynamics. I came from the University of Nevada, Reno, where I was an app admin for our HR ticketing system. Spent 3.5 odd years there. And now I'm here teaching and educating about Team Dynamics. So it is my privilege and my pleasure to not only share a couple of really bad jokes, but also talk to you about advanced ticketing today. So on my screen, you'll see our agenda for the day. We are going to do a little bit of housekeeping as we do. It's probably really dry and dull and boring and repetitive at this point, but bear with me, it won't be too long. We'll go ahead and begin as far as advanced ticketing goes with operational hours. Operational hours are a really quick down and dirty kind of setup, and the operational hours are going to be useful to configure because that is what your service level agreements are going to likely use for keeping track of tickets. From creation to closure, service level agreements can be really useful to track your turnaround time, and we're going to be talking about those today as well. We'll spend a little bit of time on automation rules. Automation rules, just for clarity, are the things that fire anytime a ticket is created. So if you wanted to set up an automation rule anytime a ticket is created, maybe you automatically want to assign it to a particular individual based on a value in your form. Automation rules is the place to do it. Automation rules are slightly different from workflows. Workflows are, I need this ticket to go from A to B, maybe C, depending on what this person says here. Workflow is a nice little, almost like roller coaster, kind of like you can put a ticket on rails, it'll go down the tracks, and you can go ahead and make sure that it goes through the particular workflow any time that a ticket goes in. And I thought I was on Do Not Disturb. There we go. Now I'm on Do Not Disturb. Okay, and then we'll conclude with some next steps and a Q&A. Go ahead and answer any of those questions that you may have. So, intended audience, surprise, Team Dynamics administrator, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're back. Today applies to you, as well as project manager. Glad to have you again as well of the implementation. This is going to be helpful and important for you to listen in on too. Likewise, anyone interested in setting up an application for tracking and automating ticketing in Team Dynamics. So this could be your service owners, people who are going to be responsible for building out your service catalog and also for delivering on those services, right? Your help desk contributors, people who are going to be managing your help desk, might need to be able to put a ticket into a workflow, have a service level agreement tied to it. And of course, your team leads, right, for the same reason as the help desk. Usually these are the individuals who are accountable for the work being done, and they want to make sure that it's all managed and taken care of fluidly. So that is our audience. As always, you will need to have a little bit of access as a prerequisite if you want to go ahead and follow along and participate. So we'll be spending some time out in TD Admin today, I think almost exclusively in TD Admin today. So make sure that you are a global administrator. TD Next and TD Client, of course, or you can be an app admin for your ticketing application. I'll show you how to go ahead and go in from that point of view as well. And you've attended our Foundations Readiness module and Ticketing Essentials. Ticketing Essentials is actually really crucial for understanding, surprise, advanced ticketing. If you don't have them, that's okay. You can still listen in, kind of put one ear to the presentation today and just chug along with us. It's just the active participation part that's going to be kind of limited. Helpful but not required is an example workflow process with 3 or less steps. We're not going to be building out in full, perhaps, your onboarding or offboarding workflow, although those are great candidates to be thinking through while especially when we get to the workflow phase, but just a simple little workflow, maybe something like a procurement workflow for when we get there. Helpful, not required. It's totally okay just to listen in. The logistics, how do we do the things that we do? Well, we try to do follow along practice and config. That just means that I will jump in, show you some things within Team Dynamics. And if you want, you can go ahead and follow along at the same time or slightly after what I am going to show you. I'm never going to tell you during this readiness course to go in and do something without first showing you. Everybody's muted. you know, too bad, so sad. Sorry that that's the way things are for right now, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you, right? We're just trying to keep a little bit of order. We definitely want to know your questions in the Q&A. Everyone can see these questions. It can be a little intimidating to ask a question. You don't want people, you know, you don't want to feel dumb asking a question, but this is a safe space to ask questions. And everyone can see these. And usually when people are asking questions, you're not the only one with that question. I very, very frequently find that if someone throws a question in the Q&A, that someone else benefits from that question as well. And you can also give it a nice little thumbs up vote as well. So we do have chat. That just comes to us here as the meeting hosts. Today, that would be Michelle and myself. So if you're having maybe some login issues, you don't really want to put that in the Q&A, go ahead and just message that to us and Michelle will take a look. We do record our sessions. Michelle does a wonderful job of getting that out the same day, 99% of the time. And we share that link with everyone after the meeting. We do have these recordings as transcribed, and that transcription is searchable. In fact, it should be transcribing my voice right now, is it? Let me see.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I must just have mine disabled for viewing then. So it's translating my voice for you right now. And you can search it later on as well. If you don't see the transcript, it just hasn't finished processing. Grab a cup of coffee, text your mom, tell her you miss her, whatever it is that you need to go ahead and do, come on back, and then it should be ready for you. All links referenced can be found in the readiness course category in the knowledge base. Highly recommend at least a few clicks worth of browsing within the readiness course category in the knowledge base. I know time is limited and time is precious. I find though that just a little bit of browsing in that category can help find some answers to some questions you didn't know that you were going to have. So take a gander there. And you also have this under the links section of your project on our solutions site. This session is approximately going to be about an hour and a half. I will do what I can to stick with that. Of course, it always depends on questions. Could finish early, could finish a little bit later. I think the important thing is while I'm here, you know, engage, participate. If I do such a miraculous job of teaching that you don't need any additional questions answered, fantastic. Or if I kind of go a little too fast, you need me to repeat something, you have a scenario, definitely put those questions in there because I find that often a little bit of dialogue up front can save a very lengthy email down the road. So don't hesitate to spend a little bit of time asking those questions. What are the outcomes for today? Well, our expectations after today's session is that you will know how to configure your SLAs or your service level agreement in Team Dynamics, set your operational hours if you want to use operational hours for your service level agreements, creating some automation rules for various routing logic and SLA assignment within Team Dynamics, and also configure your workflows using several different workflow step types. And we're going to cover those steps as well when we get to workflows. So the call to action for you, if you want to go ahead and follow along and maybe click along with me, is to go ahead and sign into your business entity. I am going to be doing things today in Sandbox by choice, not because of any particular warning to you. All the things that we're going to be covering today can either be deleted or inactivated in your admin environment. So you can log into production if you wish, or if you're just like, yeah, I don't know that I want to commit any of this readiness stuff to production, totally okay, log into Sandbox. I'd love to see a couple of thumbs up in the chat or ready whenever I've got a couple of people logged in. And I'm going to have a sip of water. Michael's ready. Thank you, Michael. All right. Michael, you and I may be the only ones that are ready today. All right, it's just us. That's it. Let's go ahead and do it. If you need to log in later on, go ahead and feel free to. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit about operational hours. So why operational hours? Well, as I mentioned before, by bringing in your operational hours is going to determine the clock within Team Dynamics, specifically within your ticketing application for service level agreements or SLAs, as we call them. A point of note for my enterprise clients out there or my enterprise listeners is that you can set different operational hours per ticketing application. So if you have an HR ticketing application and an IT ticketing application, and maybe HR is only working 8 to 4 and IT is working 7 to 7, then you can set different operational hours per ticketing application for that Monday through Friday timeframe. To configure your operational hours, we're going to be within TD admin. We're going to go to the application submenu item. We're going to click on the name of the ticketing application, and we're going to click on operational hours. I'm also going to go ahead and show you how to do this. This is the global admin way to log in. I'm also going to go ahead and show you the application administrator way to log in as well. So configure the start and end times and the time zone. So as I mentioned before, I'm on Pacific Standard Time, so I probably would not want to set my operational hours for, say, Eastern Time. Maybe Hawaii time if I wanted to go ahead and imagine for a little bit. But please note that the operational hours only tick Monday through Friday, and weekends are not considered for operational hours. So when we set our operational hours, it's automatically going to be Monday through Friday, and they're going to run on that time frame. So the start and the end time and the time zone Monday through Friday. It will, however, respect any days off that you configured. So these are not going to be days that tick for operational hours, and therefore also not for your service level agreements. So really, we're setting the time frame and the time zone for when your service level agreements are going to be actively ticking towards completion. Let's go ahead and jump on in and take a look at what that looks like. So I am in my client services environment today, and notice that I have the /sandbox at the end to go ahead and log in. As per the slide, I would go ahead and click on administrators, and I would need to log in. Of course, I would need to log in. Although that is pretty good to be going through as many meetings as I have today without logging in to Team Dynamics. So here we are. I am logged into my sandbox. I'm in SB TD admin for sandbox TD admin. If you're never sure if you're in production or sandbox, you can always take a look at the hyperlink up there. And again, per the slide, I'm going to click on applications. Today, I'm going to go ahead and just work in my human resources ticketing application. I come from a human resources implementation myself, so a little bit like home for me today. And I'm going to go ahead and go down here to operational hours. That is going to be the global admin way to go ahead and jump in. But what if you're just a ticketing admin? You don't have access to TD admin, but you are still responsible for a ticketing application. And you need to go ahead and set some operational hours, some service level agreements, whatever that may be. Well, in a new tab here, I'm going to go ahead and again, go out to my sandbox. And normally, again, if you're just working tickets and you have no access to admin, you'd be logging in as a user. And if I jump on out to my human resources ticketing application, so that's our application menu or waffle icon, I'd click on that, go out to my ticketing application. Here's my ticketing application. And within the ticketing application, it's kind of tucked away off to the side here, but there's this gear icon. And if I click on gear, if I was an application administrator for this, I would have the admin option right here. In fact, let me see if I can show it from a different application. Or did they revoke my admin access? They revoked my admin access. Oh no. That's okay. I'll go ahead and show you that towards the end if you need to see it. But if you click on the admin button that appears up here, if you're an admin, it would go ahead and take you straight out to this page right here. It would take you to this page. You wouldn't be able to see applications. You wouldn't be able to go up a level because you're only an application administrator for this particular ticketing application. And you'd be able to go ahead and scroll down and do operational hours here. So I was an application administrator for HR, and that was how I would go in and make modifications to my ticketing application as an app administrator. I didn't even know TD admin was a thing until I came to work here at Team Dynamics. To pick up with the operational hours here, It looks like these have already been set, but odds are is that you would need to go ahead and set them yourself. So if I was to just go ahead and delete some of these values here, I want to say it's set to Eastern Standard Time by default. There we go. And all you would need to do is go ahead and set your start and end time. So I'm going to go ahead and say that HR is going to be an early riser. We're going to get there at 7 a.m. And we're also going to go ahead and leave a little bit earlier. We're going to leave at 4 p.m. So it gives me a 9-hour operational day. And then I would just be sure to go ahead and check the time zone. And being in the Reno, Nevada area, we are in Pacific time. And I'm going to go ahead and just choose Pacific time. And then click save. And that is all there is to it when it comes to setting up your operational hours. Any questions along the lines of either going into your ticketing application, going in as an app admin, or configuring your operational hours? All pretty standard stuff there, right? Okay, so now that we have our operational hours configured, let's go ahead and talk about those service level agreements. Because the main purpose of setting up your operational hours is to be able to go ahead and track your ticket performance against when you are supposed to be operating. So the purpose of service level agreements, these are just tools to measure how consistently you're both responding and resolving the tickets that come in. So it can be a common objective metric for performance across your entire functional area, department, subdivision, whoever's going to be using that ticketing application. If you wanted to go ahead and track their performance, SLAs are a nice way to be able to do that. And we do have this nice getting started with service level agreements article that Michelle's already gone ahead and shared there with you in the chat. I reference that article now and then just to kind of help people get an overview of SLAs if you've never used one, right? And something to keep in mind as well is you don't have to implement SLAs. I'm getting a little bit ahead of the slide deck a little bit, but if you're looking at these things and you're wondering, you're like, I don't know that we're going to use this. This is nice to know, maybe later. Even when we get to the end of the slide, the course, as we do, there's always those action items. These are all optional. My friend Sirkin likes to call this like the candy store, right? Advanced ticketing. All of these things that we're covering today in advanced ticketing, don't feel obligated to go ahead and implement. Don't feel obligated to use them. Know what they are, know that we provide them. And if you want to pass on them for now and bring them back in later, totally and completely okay. So don't feel obligated to have to think through like, what are we going to do for service level agreements if you've never used them before? I should have put that at the beginning of the presentation, but I wanted to mention it at least now so that way I could maybe pull back some of the fear, pull back some of the overwhelming, yet another list of things to do. Totally okay to not do anything that we're talking about today, but know what they are. And honestly, 10 times out of 10, people usually end up implementing some candy in their implementation, but don't feel obligated to use all of it or even any of it. So my little soapbox aside, just to probably manage a little bit of the expectations there, that article is really, really handy if you ever wanted to fall back on it. When it comes to configuring your service level agreements, again, we're going to be in TD admin applications and the name of the application, or if, again, you're not going to be a global admin and you're going to be managing it as an application admin, you would be within TD Next. You'd click on your ticketing application, you'd click on the gear icon, and then you'd click on admin. And I think Michelle was kind enough to set that up for me behind the scenes, and I'll be demonstrating what that looks like in just a little bit in real time. So you'll then, within there, go down to the sub menu item, however you get there, one of those two ways, and you'll click on service level agreements. And we're going to go ahead and build out a sample service level agreement here in just a little bit by selecting plus new. The response and the resolution are the two main components of a service level agreement, right? How long did it take for me to respond, and how long did it take for me to resolve whatever it is that's going to be coming into our ticketing application? Each of these two different components actually can have multiple escalation actions based on the percentage of configured time. And I have an example that I'm going to go ahead and show you in a little bit, but say at 100% of SLA. So in other words, if the response time goes all the way up through the entire time frame that they had to respond and nothing happens, it's not satisfied, maybe notify the manager. That's a really, really common one to implement, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a few. SLAs are usually tiered off into categories, such as levels or like precious metals, and they likely will have about 3 to 5 different service level agreements. So one example scheme is level 1 might be fast, level 5 might be slower, right? So level 1 is like, this is really important. Maybe we only apply it for network outages, and we've really got to rally the troops together in order to meet this particular SLA. Level 5 might be slower. It could even be your default SLA. This is just standard work over the course of the day, but we still want to track it and make sure that we're providing good timeframes for customer service and ticket resolution. Likewise, platinum, bronze, it's whatever really works for you and your team, but here's a couple suggestions to think through. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to sign out because I'm hoping. Oh, you know what, Michelle, I just realized it's the, was it client services.mark.flores? Was that the one?
That is the one I did, yeah.
All right, thank you very, very much. Appreciate you supporting my lack of planning today. So if I jump into my human resources ticketing application and click on the gear, there it is, beautiful. So there's that admin option that I was talking about a little bit ago. So if you're a ticketing application administrator and you need to go in and be an administrator for the human resources ticketing application, I would just click on admin, and then it would only show from here down. It shows this one because I have expanded permission, but just know that anybody who you just denote as an app admin and not a global admin will only see from here down. So they would be able to manage all of the TD admin stuff without giving them full access to admin. And then I would go ahead and scroll down and go to service level agreements and begin. To show you the full way from the global admin aspect, just to be thorough, anytime I'm feeling a little lost or overwhelmed, I can always click on home to go back home. Just like in the real world, if you're lost, try and find your way home. And I'd click on applications. I'd go into my human resources ticketing application, and then I'd scroll on down to service level agreements. Here we can see that we already have a couple of different service level agreements that are already in place. And I'm actually probably going to replicate that bronze one, but let's go ahead and just click plus new. And I'm going to call this level 5. I'm going to call it low priority, right? So level 5 is my low priority. Level 1 is going to be my emergency or my high or my critical priority. And then I'm going to say lowest priority, also the default SLA level. So you don't have to check it as active to start, especially if you're just configuring and playing around with it. Notice that on my new SLA, it automatically says use operational hours when calculating deadlines. So it's automatically going to use that Monday through Friday, in this case, 7 to 4 Pacific Standard Time or 9-hour operational day with this box checked. If I uncheck that box, I don't have to use operational hours, but then it's a 24/7 SLA. So for some of my, for anybody out there who maybe has a 24/7 ticketing solution and you wanted to go ahead and implement SLAs in that, you would just uncheck operational hours. But this is HR. HR generally works reasonable hours generally. And we're gonna go ahead and use 7 to 4 like I configured earlier. So the respond by, we're going to go ahead and set a respond by. And because this is my low level, my low priority casual work, I'm going to go ahead and say that I want my team to respond within one day, one working day. So I want this to go ahead and be a deadline of 9 hours and 0 minutes. I would like you to at least let them know that we got the ticket within 9 hours and 0 minutes or one operational day. Resolved by, I want this to be a week, right? This is just, again, standard work. This is what I'm going to go ahead and set up. And so I want this to be 45 hours and 0 minutes. This is just kind of a nice way to get started. And I'm going to go ahead now and click save. After I click save, you're going to see a lot more that you can do with these. So for example, with respond by, now I have these escalation steps that I can incorporate. Again, remember, an escalation step are just things that happen after a certain amount of time has passed. So in this case, it automatically gives me one that says after 100% of the deadline has passed, so after 9 hours and 0 minutes, no actions will be taken. Well, let's go ahead and edit that. Let's go ahead and click on edit. So what do I want to do at 100% if no one's done anything? Well, I have the option to maybe reassign it to someone if I wanted to. Maybe in this scenario, I'd want to bring in my supervisor, Sirkin, and I'd want him to be the one to be responsible for it now, right? Because he's my boss and he's probably going to have to clean up my mess. Maybe that's part of what's going on. I can change the priority. Maybe I want to update the priority to something. I'm going to leave the priority alone for this example. Something that I like to do is note, again, if I wasn't going to reassign it to him, I would say notify the responsible resources manager as a great way of managing service level agreements. You also may want to notify the responsible resource as well, saying, hey, kind of dropped the ball on this. Is everything okay? How can we help get you back up and operational again? Because you had a whole day to reach out to this person and it didn't happen. You can choose to notify the reviewer if you want. The reviewer is not the same as the responsible. They're just sort of the person who overlooks certain tickets by type. I'm not going to do that in this example. You can notify the requester and or the creator if you want. I very rarely find good business cases for notifying the requester or the creator that the SLA was exceeded unless it's written specifically in your policy. It would be I just think it comes across as a little cheeky or a little odd to say, oh, yep, we didn't fulfill this when we wanted to. Sorry about that. But who knows? You may have a better use case for it than I do. What I usually like to set up as a standard default for my low level is at 100%, notify the responsible resource and notify responsible resources manager. I personally think that's a great starting point. So I'm going to save that, but I also want to give this person a little bit of time and a little bit of a warning too. So I can actually add an escalation step here. And what I'd like to do is at 75% of that whole 9-hour time frame, whatever the math comes out to on that, I want to say it's like 70, it's like 6.75, I think. 6.75 hours, so 6 hours and 45 minutes. I just want to go ahead and let them know that it's at 75%, right? So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now I've given them at 75% of the deadline, notify the responsible resource. Hey, you're coming up on the timeline here. You haven't made an effort, or it doesn't look like at least that you've logged on the ticket that you've reached out, just so you know. And then at 100%, like, okay, notify them and the manager. I tend to like that as a starting point, but of course, if you have policy or preference that dictate otherwise, go ahead and feel free to do that. And I like to replicate that as well for the resolve by. So for this 100% resolution, I want them to know, just as a starting point, go ahead and save that. And then I would also add, again, at 75%, I'd probably want to notify the person responsible. So this is how I like to set up, again, a very low priority SLA. Personally, you're always free to go ahead and do whatever you will with this. A couple quick points on how to satisfy the criteria for response and resolution. If you're ever curious as to what it means to respond, go ahead and click on this question mark right here, and it'll let you know that it counts responses by updating the ticket to a status class of either in process or completed. So it's not just putting a comment on the ticket. It's not going to know that you're going to count that as responding. It's going to count it as responding when you actually go into the ticket and update the ticket status to a status class of in process or completed. Likewise, for resolve by, it's only going to be satisfied with a status class of completion. So if I want to go ahead and save this, then that is my low level service level agreement. And there it is right there, level 5, low priority. Oh, and of course, if you actually want to use it, you need to check that active button. Go ahead and save it again. There we go. I saw active set to false and I panicked a little bit there. Again, these are usually influenced by policy, and preference. Sometimes it's helpful to let tickets go without SLAs for a little bit and see what's coming in and then adjust accordingly. But any questions, at least on the setup side of service level agreements? If the responsible party is a team, no ticket assignee yet, does the whole team get notified? That's a really good question because you can assign a responsible group to a ticket. I would have to test that out, Adam, and get back with you because I typically find that within team responsibility, ultimately what ends up happening is one person within that group ends up taking sole responsibility for the start to end part. But I would say, let me see here. I'd have to test that out and get back to you. I've never actually been asked that question. That's a really good one. So Adam, do you mind actually on your project in our solutions page, do you want to go ahead and submit a project issue? And I'll go ahead and take a look at it later on. Awesome. Thank you very, very much. Really good question. I've never been posed with that before. So I like getting stumped. I'll continue. I'll count the stump counter at 1. So bravo. Very good. Automation rules. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about automation rules. So what are they? As I mentioned before, they are rules that manage tickets anytime the ticket is created. So it can be a logical way to handle various exceptions or differences as tickets come in, and then different actions can then happen based on your criteria. So if, for those who are familiar with if-then logic setup, if the ticket has X or Y data elements, then execute B or C actions. So if the ticket is coming from the university president's office, then assign it directly to the IT manager for handling and change the status to high priority, right? Those are some examples of how you can use automation rules. Again, they're meant to handle exceptions or differences, not necessarily default behaviors. Data elements such as baked in TDX fields, custom attributes, content in the subject or body from the email monitor, creating tickets out of the emails, those are all great items to go ahead and hook into when it comes to building out your automation rules. And we have a nice knowledge base article there as well on how to get started with those. But one of the nice things about being in readiness course is we're going to get started with those right now as well. So again, within admin applications, ticketing application automation rules, or again, remember, you can go in as an app administrator by clicking on that gear and then admin from within your ticketing application in TD Next. You can do the plus new button once you're in automation rules, plus new. And then after you save the rule, so once you create it, then you can go ahead and edit it. Sometimes if you're expecting to see an option and it doesn't appear, the pattern in Team Dynamics is to save it first and then edit it. So that's what we're going to do with those. The automation conditions, as you scroll down through that page, the automation conditions are going to be your if. So if these conditions are met, the automation actions are your then. So then do these things. For example, if the ticket was set for the HR building, then assign it to your HR tech, for example. Or if the ticket was asking for support on a Mac, send it to the Mac team. Automation conditions can be configured with an and or an or using the show advanced button. And the last rule wins. So as you build out a lot of these different automation rules, you're going to be allowed to sort them numerically. So like from 0 to however high up you can think of. And if it matches on, if you don't select this stop on match checkbox, so as soon as it matches, then you match and you go and you run with it. But if you leave them all open and 0 works, and like rule number 1000 works, like if you name it 1000, I'm not saying there are 1000 rules, then it's going to say, well, this one has a higher number, so I'm going to execute this rule. That's the way that works. I typically just manage that by doing stop on match. And if you're wondering what I mean, well, that star means it's my time to shine. And I'm going to go ahead and show you what I mean. So I'm already still here in my ticketing application for HR. I'm going to go on up towards the top here, and there's that automation rules sidebar option. And I'm going to go ahead and click plus new. And I'm going to go ahead and say, oh gosh, what should be the name of this rule? So I'm just going to go ahead and call it a test HR rule for now. Test HR rule, demo auto rule. So there's that evaluation order that I was talking about. So I can go ahead and enter any number here if I wanted to. The default number is 0. There is that stop on match. So if you number your rules, again, it's going to stop as soon as it finds a set of criteria that works with. So that's typically how I end up managing my rules. And I'm going to leave stop on match for now. And I'm going to put this towards the front of my list and click save. Now that I've saved it, I'll go ahead and click on edit. Again, I would need to be sure to check this box as active when I'm done with everything. And if I scroll down a little bit, here are those automation conditions that I was talking about. So for example, if I want to go ahead and let's see here, what type of scenario do I want to go ahead and build out? So if let's see, what would be kind of fun here? I'm really drawing a blank. So if here we go, if the start date on an HR ticket is going to be this week, if they want us to start on this ticket this week, then what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to go ahead and change the priority to high. That's one thing that I can go ahead and do. I can go ahead and assign the service level agreement, right? I can pull in any of those other service level agreements that I created. I can go ahead and assign it to a particular individual. I'll go ahead and give it to Aaron Crane. He's my boss's boss's boss. I'm sure he'd love to go ahead and get this ticket. And I can also choose to go ahead and do a handful of other things. I can update the impact if I wanted to. Well, that doesn't make sense for this scenario. I can change the urgency for this scenario. I'm going to just leave the urgency alone for now. I'm going to change the priority to high because it's a big deal. They want us to work on it this week. I'm not going to go ahead and assign a service level agreement to this. I can apply a task template, which is a grouping of tasks that maybe apply to certain types of tickets. So if you always know that you're going to do X, Y, and Z task, you may want to automatically template. You may want to go ahead and put those in a template and then automatically apply it anytime a ticket is created. I can also kick it into a workflow if I wanted to, or I can choose to notify some people or some groups whenever a ticket is created. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and say if the start date is this week, then give it to Aaron, who's my boss's boss's boss, and change the priority to high. If I wanted to go ahead and make it active, I check the active box and then go ahead and save it. If I go ahead and go out one more level here, here you can see what I was referring to about the evaluation order and then stop on match. So these are all set to be evaluated first because they all have 0 in them, right? These are all going to be first matched and first evaluated, and they're all going to stop on match. So that's not necessarily a good practice here. If I jump out here, maybe to my VIP ticket, maybe I'd want to go ahead and set the evaluation order on that for 10, just to kind of move it out a little bit. And if I wanted to jump into this particular responsibility and SLA assignment one, maybe I want to go ahead and just put this one at 20, for example, and then go ahead and save it and go back out. So now this evaluation order makes a little bit more sense. So this one is going to be evaluated first. Stop on match is set to yes. So if it matches this rule, it doesn't matter what any of the other rules are, it's going to stop on this match and execute this rule. If it doesn't match any the conditions set on this rule, it's going to go to the next one, which is VIP ticket, and then to the next one. And they're all set to stop on match. If these were all set to no for stop on match, and say it met this criteria and that criteria, this one would win because it has a higher evaluation order number. So I typically end up using stop on match because I don't like the idea of different rules firing depending on which criteria are met. I focus more on establishing a very sturdy structure in the evaluation order, making sure that I have a priority list, and then always making sure to stop on match. But that's just me, just know kind of how the two work together. So,
Mark,
I
there's
see.
a question there in the chat.
I was just about to look at that. That is a great one for the Q&A there, Adam. I think that's a really good question for everyone to be able to go ahead and see. Can there be more than one of the same number? Yes, there can. I just demonstrated that. I don't think it's a good practice. I really don't, because then they kind of, especially when they're all stop on match, it's just there's a possibility for some problems there and it won't evaluate the way you want it to. And then if so, how exactly, I'm not sure how it evaluates them, honestly. It could just be, especially when they're all 0, and if the ticket matches both of them, I'm thinking, because I see this everywhere else in team dynamics, it's usually order, numeric order, and then alpha. So my hunch, again, because that's bad automation rule management to begin with, but my hunch would then, it would the second sort to alpha. That is my hunch. So I would say that's another great question. I would also say, even in our own environment, like that was bad management, but I took it as an opportunity to go ahead and restructure it in a way that made more sense, right? I usually do in increments of 10 or increments of 100. So that way, if I need to go ahead and insert rules in between, I can. I'm not stuck with 0, 1, 2, 3. And okay, well, now I've got to move one in between 0 and 1, and then I've got to redo the order again. So it allows for a little bit more flexibility by doing it in increments of 10, but really smart question. Yeah, great candidate for the Q&A as well, but I hope that helps. I hope that helps clear up some stuff. I think best answer is that's a bad practice, personally speaking. So, but I am curious to know what happens as well. My hunch is that it's second alpha. I might make a note to look that up later as well. So any other additional questions along the lines of automation rules or setting them up? I think something to point out again is that automation rules are meant to handle the exceptions or the differences. So even going back to my demo automation rule here, so starting this week would be an exception, right? For this particular ticket, start this week should not be the norm for this particular example. Some other examples that appear are like, let me actually go ahead and edit this real quick. I'll do one more really good example. So if under conditions, if I go ahead and scroll down to, like, let me see here. There we go, requester. So let me flip the script a little bit. I'll go ahead and pull Aaron out of there. What if the requester is Aaron, my boss's boss's boss? So I'm gonna go ahead and put Aaron in here. So if Aaron is the requester, how do I want to go ahead and handle it? Well, maybe on the form, remember from your ticketing essentials, you can set default values on your fields for forms. So what if on the form that Aaron is using, it automatically is going to default assign to my support desk, right? So Aaron goes into the client portal, makes a ticket request. He's using a ticket form where support desk is the default responsible group, but it's Aaron. He's very, very high within the team dynamics hierarchy of things. This would be an exception. I don't want him to go through tier 1 support. I might want his, oh, Marcus isn't even in here. He might want Sirkin to go ahead and handle his request, right? He may not want to go through tier 1. He might want my boss, Sirkin, to go ahead and handle this request. This would be a great example of managing an exception. On the form, I would set the default value. Like 90% of the time, it's going to be the support desk that gets these tickets. However, if the requester is Aaron, then I want Sirkin to handle it. I want Sirkin to be the one assigned to it. So that's a better illustration of using automation rules to manage exceptions and differences and not to maintain the status quo. Usually, if you're talking about something that always needs to happen, there's somewhere else in the tool that you can go ahead and set that value to. Automation rules are going to help for all of these nice little one-offs, right? So go ahead. I hope that helps. So I'm a little bit ahead of schedule. Normally it's about 1 hour in by the time we get to the 5-minute break. So that is a good thing. So go ahead, take a stretch, get some water, whatever it is that you need to do, and we will go ahead and reconvene in about 5 minutes. If you have any other questions or if you think of anything, go ahead and throw them in the Q&A and I will answer them when we come back in about 5 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you had a nice break. I know I switched from sit to stand, so you might see me moving around a little bit more than normal. It's nice to go ahead and have one of those adjustable desks now and then. Thank you, Adam. Looks like Adam has another question in the Q&A. Thank you for that. Thinking on SLAs again, can you directly link an SLA to a priority, or do you need to set up an automation rule for that? So that is a really great question. SLAs can be assigned by default on the ticketing type. So for those that went through, I want to say it was either the, you may not have actually gone into ticketing types yet, but within the ticketing type is where you can set the default SLA value. So here in my HR ticketing application, if I go down to type and maybe compensation, nothing against human resources, but maybe if I go ahead and set the default SLA to low priority, right? Like little tongue-in-cheek humor at my previous work environment, right? You can set the default SLA by type. If you wanted to set an SLA according to the priority, you would need to use an automation rule for that. And so if I wanted to go ahead and create or even just edit the existing one that I just made and go in and click on edit, instead of the start date, if I went ahead and then picked that priority, if that priority is low, then I wouldn't want to do any of those things, but maybe I'd want to tie in that low priority SLA that I just created, right? So you would want to go ahead and use automation rules so long as when the ticket is created, it automatically has a priority in it. So if you create a ticket and it doesn't have a priority, then it's not going to meet this criteria and it's not going to be able to assign that SLA value. So just as a thing to point out. So good question, Adam. Good question. Okay. So now we get into some of what I think is really the fun and complex bits, which are workflows. So the purpose of workflows is to create predetermined paths for tickets to ensure consistent outcomes are realized. I did this myself, again, back at the University of Nevada, Reno in our HR office. They were managing things like promotions and salary requests and temporary increases all through email. And even though they had a set process that they had established over time based on paper, they wanted to know if Team Dynamics would be able to do something to kind of structure and organize this particular path rather than having to juggle, depending on the request and the people involved, hundreds of communications around a single request. And we were able to do that. I was able to do that before I left there to come to here. And so workflows then for them created those nice little paths for very important requests for tickets to ensure that they had consistent outcomes. So along that path, we did, and you can employ a variety of workflow steps in your pursuit of those consistent outcomes. And we have a nice little knowledge base article there to go ahead and talk about how to configure your ticket workflows. So I mentioned really what I would consider to be a bit of a fringe example, but the most common use cases for workflows goes around the lines of on and offboarding of employees, right? You know, anytime someone comes or goes from your organization, these are the things that need to happen and these are the people that need to do them, and it all needs to be able to be tracked along a particular path. Great use case for workflows within a ticketing environment. Procurement is another common one and a good one. Purchasing of items such as hardware. Access requests like file shares or buildings for keys, those are great for workflows as well. Some key processes, if you're going to be doing change or major incident or even problem management, according to the ITIL standard, these are great as well to build those out as workflows within your ticketing application. Really just any process where you can't miss, like I mentioned before, someone wants a promotion, someone wants a temporary pay raise, that's kind of something that's on us as HR to go ahead and make sure that we process in a consistent and timely manner. But it would include things like disaster recovery, some legal auditing scenarios, anything you can think of where A request is going to come in the form of a ticket, and it needs to travel down a path, and these are the steps and these are the branches. Great use cases for workflows. When it comes to configuring workflows, it can kind of be a little bit daunting, but it's helpful to think of it like you're assembling a puzzle. So when you're assembling a puzzle, you got to take a look at all the different pieces, right? When I would build puzzles with my grandmother, the very first thing that we did is you got to flip over all the pieces so you know what you're not looking at any of the backside of the puzzle. You're not looking at any of that brown. So to look at the pieces of the puzzle in workflows, these are what they look like. Tasks, right? So within a workflow, you can assign tasks. We have approval steps. So this can be someone that just needs to say yay or nay on something. If they say yes, it can go down one path. If you say no, it can go down another path. So approvals are a very common step. And these are all in order of most used, I should say. So tasks, absolutely, number one. Approvals, absolutely up there, yes. Conditions. So condition can be something that is even pulling from the form itself. So like if someone is requesting access, maybe they want access to both, let me see here, Slack and Teams, for example, right? Or maybe that's what's on the form. Do you want access to Slack or do you want access to Teams? Well, depending on what they put on the ticket form, that condition branch will go ahead and take a look at what they chose and then branch out accordingly to create the right tasks accordingly. We also have choice. Let me see here. I will get to that right when I'm done with the list, Adam. That's a good question. We also have choice. Choice is a little bit more like a complex approval where it's a stop and someone needs to select something in order for the ticket to move on, except choice. You actually get to go ahead and customize what the responses are, and you're not limited to two. You're not limited to just approval and rejection. Choice is really great for things like the change advisory process, where maybe approve with modifications, reject, right? You'd be able to build all three of those out as a choice step and not be restricted to just approve, reject. So that's one implementation of the choice step. Notifications, as things go through the workflow, you may want to notify certain important people of certain important things. Notifications are a great way to do that. We have branch and collector steps if you wanted to branch out and do things concurrently. So if it's going to branch out, maybe condition, task, approval, condition. If you have a very complex workflow, you'd use a branch and then a collector to go ahead and keep that workflow going. And then we also have web services. So web service allows you to make API calls in the middle of a workflow. It's more of a technical step. We won't be covering that today in our readiness course, but just know that Team Dynamics has a bunch of API endpoints, as well as any other application out there that you wanted to hook into their API endpoints. You'd be able to use a web service step in your workflow to be able to do that. And then lastly, and honestly, leastly used in my experience, is the timer step. So very infrequently see timer used, usually along the lines of, okay, I've created the account, but I don't want to go ahead and move on to the next step because I know behind the scenes it's doing the account creation and the provisioning and all of that stuff, and that runs every 4 hours. You may want to go ahead and insert a 4-hour timer, so that way the next part of the workflow doesn't automatically go to someone who, if they're being responsible and they're on the ball, they won't be able to do anything because the server's still handling everything. So timer's the least frequently used. Okay, I got through them all. I kept my part of the bargain, kept my promise. Adam has yet another great question here. What does it mean for the approvals only if not in a group? What does it mean for the approvals only if not in a group? So that is a really great question. It's currently a little bit of a, I'm going to call it a quirk. I've requested that it be fixed, but basically within an approval step, and I'm going to, Michelle, if you can leave that up so that I make sure to address it when I dive in. But within an approval step, you can choose the individuals that are responsible for managing the approval. Currently, within Team Dynamics, it's a bit of a bug, if it's a bit of a shortcoming, honestly. A group counts as one person. So even if your group has 5 members in it, right now, it only sees that group as one person. And so if one person within that group says, I approve it, It doesn't see that there are 4 other people that haven't said anything. It just sees that one person, there's one record, and it's like, oh, okay, we're good, and it moves on. So I've requested that it be fixed. Very strongly suggest as well that you also submit an enhancement request to let our product team know that it's something that should be addressed. I would use, oops, so there you go. There you go. So that's the submit a product enhancement request. So that's what that means. That's what that means. Props to you for being a fine print reader. That's something I typically skim myself. So great question, Adam. Thank you for bringing that up. So where do we go to configure our workflows? Because there's a lot of power to be had in workflows, right? So again, within TD admin, however you get there, whether it is that global admin, TD admin application, ticketing application name, and then workflows in the sidebar, or if you're just an app administrator, it would be TD Next, waffle icon, ticketing application, and then the gear icon, and then admin, don't forget. You're going to go ahead and click on plus new for the workflow, give it a name, and then click on view builder to go ahead and view the overall workflow builder. And then we're going to create a new step. So just something to note, we're going to obviously dive in there. If I click the button, see, I'm going to shine a light on this in just a little bit. But we give you 2 exit points within a workflow. There's the green and the red. Those are your exit points for the workflow. So approved and reject, those are really what those represent. And the workflow steps that we're going to be adding are the stepping stones to those points. So we're going to create a start step. We're going to create the steps to get there. And ultimately, at the end of the workflow, it's going to be approval, everything's good, or reject. Clicking the workflow button inside that view builder screen, it's going to give you some details for some extra options. And one of the important things to note about workflows is that it operates on a check-in, check-out basis. So if I go ahead and work on a workflow and I check it out and I forget to check it back in, Miles, then then no one else is going to be able to go ahead and jump in there and look at it. I kid, I like Miles. We talk a lot. But just to know that if someone is in there working on it, you're not also going to be able to go in there and work on it concurrently or simultaneously. Whoever has it checked out, they're going to have to check it back in order to go ahead and have someone else jump in and modify the workflow just for modification. So let me go ahead and shine a little bit, jump on out to our HR ticketing example here. So if I scroll on down, and here down at the very, very bottom is workflows, right? So we have a handful of different workflows that are in here. I'm just going to go ahead and do a new one by clicking on plus new. And I'm going to go ahead and do promotion review process just for fun. So HR ticketing, add a description, workflow for assessing employee promotion and pay scale review, also known as raises. Go ahead and save it. So there it is. I clicked on save and there is my promotion review process. I'm going to go ahead and click on that name. And from there, I'm going to go ahead and click view builder. Now, once I'm in here, it's going to look very blank and overwhelming. That's okay. At least the blankness overwhelmed me, at least when I first started building out workflows. But here are those exit points that I talked about, right? So there's going to be an approval and a reject, and I'm going to move these over here because workflows typically read from left to right. And from there, I'm going to go ahead and click on new step. And I'm going to go ahead and put my new step as manager approval, right? I'm going to make this an approval step. Actually, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to make this a choice step. I'm going to have a little bit of fun with this and I'm going to make this a choice step. So notice here, I can assign it to a specific resource. In this case, I could go ahead and just assign it to an individual. So maybe there is only one manager that reviews all these. Maybe it's Carrie. I'll go ahead and assign it to Carrie. But usually what you're going to want to do, or maybe it's someone within HR, you can also assign it to a role, and there's a lot of power behind this. So for example, you can look at the requesters manager role and go ahead and assign that role to this ticket. So anytime someone tries to request a promotion, this is not good practice, obviously, by the way, but obviously the first stop in this bad practice would be the requester's manager, right? Like, what are they doing requesting a promotion? I want to be able to take a look at this. Anytime you assign by role, however, you're going to need to have a fallback. That's just in case the value is empty. It's just in case it has a problem, processing the request. So anytime you do it by role instead of by specific resource, you've got to insert a fallback. My practice when I was managing workflows was just to make it myself, since I was the one creating the workflow. So that way, if anything went wrong, it would fall back to me, it would come to me, and that would be my way of knowing, okay, something needs to be handled manually. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the choice section now, because I did decide to make it a choice value. So I'm going to go ahead and make choice number 1 as approved. And I'm going to go ahead and add a choice. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more choices. I'm going to make my last one no way. And then for the middle one, I'm going to go ahead and do approved, but with requested salary modifications, right? Just for fun. Go ahead and save this. Go ahead and close my pop-up, and there it is. So our very first step, I know that because of the play button here, that's going to be our starting step, is this manager approval, and it's a choice step. I'm going to make a second step now. I'm going to go ahead and do new step. And maybe I'm going to go ahead and make it a notification of rejection. You see, I do this a lot because Firefox just volunteered that for me. I'm going to go ahead and do a type of notification. I'm going to just make this a notification. And I'm going to go ahead and make the recipient role as the requester. Again, anytime you enter a role, you need to go ahead and do a fallback. And I just usually put myself in. That's kind of a better practice. And then here I'd be able to go ahead and build out the notification. So rejection notification, and then I've got the ticket body. I can do hello. I'll insert a nice little HTML break there. This is to let, and then here we have template tags. If you haven't experienced template tags yet, if I click on this, this is like a variable. So this is to let requester full name, right? Know that request ID number, and then I can go ahead and bring in the ID number has been rejected. They may reapply at, and then I can go ahead and bring in our client URL if I wanted to for the client portal URL on our client portal page here. And then another hard break, and then sincerely me. There we go. If I wanted to know what this looked like, I could always click on the generate preview button. And so there it is, a nice little sample, kind of zoom in on. So rejection notification body, hello, this is to let Jamie Kenton, just brought in a name, right? That ID 123456 has been rejected, right? And then there's our client portal stub example. So sincerely me. Go ahead and save that. So now, if I wanted to tie these things together, I'll just go ahead and maybe put this over here. So if the manager selects no way, I'm just going to grab this with the left mouse button, drag it over to the notification, and there it is. So if no is selected, it's going to send a notification of rejection. And then once that's been done, I want it to exit the workflow completely. I want it to exit with a status of rejected. For the other ones, let's go ahead and do, let's see here. Let's go ahead and do a new step. And I'm going to make this an approval. Let's see, I'm going to make this, I'm going to say HR approval. Let's go ahead and do this. And I'll make this an approval step. So Adam's question had to do with groups. So this approver field, if I enter a group like the data management group, this is where Team Dynamics, for whatever reason currently at the moment, again, I've logged this, I hope you all as well, but it only recognizes the group as one person. It doesn't matter if there's 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 people in this group. It only sees one approver. So just something to go ahead and note, if I wanted it to be a group, I would need to go ahead and add these people individually to go ahead and sign off on them in order to go ahead and represent that group. So just a sticking point, just something that we call out on the slide. Adam so accurately read the fine print, and I'm taking a little bit of time here as well, so you know. For HR approval, I'm going to go ahead and I'll just leave that alone for right now, just for demonstration purposes. So here we're assigning it specifically not by role, but by approver. So if you're giving it directly to an individual, you don't need a fallback role. And the approval step, there's a couple different options here. So you can do any. So if any of those people sign off on it, then it's going to be okay and it'll move on. I can enforce all. So all of those people, all 4 of them, Carrie, Andre, Sirkin, and John would all have to approve my promotion request. Fat chance and Sirkin's in there, but you could also set it to vote. And if I set it to vote, you would have votes to approve and votes to reject. So for approve, maybe I want 3, and then votes to reject, I only want 1, right? Like if even one person, or maybe 2, we'll go ahead and 2. So that way there's a little bit of an overlap there. So if I go ahead and save this, go ahead and notice it created that step. And so this is going to be where I'm going to go approve, but with requested pay modified, right? So maybe HR is going to be like, you're giving that person way too much of a pay raise. And so if they approve or if they reject, right, then I would go ahead and be able to handle that differently. So let's conclude this workflow with a couple of tasks. So enter promotion into system. And I'm just going to go ahead and make this a task. And again, you can assign it to a role. You can assign it to a specified resource. I'm just going to go ahead and assign it specifically to the person in my fictitious HR world that I know is responsible for handling these, which would be my good buddy Jackson. And if I wanted to wait for tasks to be completed before it moves on, I would check that box. I typically find that that box gets checked anyway. So if you don't check that box, it's just going to keep barreling through the rest of the workflow. If you want it to stop, wait for it to be completed and then move on, which most of the time people do, check the box. So I'm going to go ahead and click save. I'm going to say, so that task will appear on the ticket. Enter promotion into system. I'm just going to go ahead and go from approve to here, maybe put that down a little bit. And let's say if HR rejects it, the promotion is still going to go through, but with the original pay. So I'm just going to go ahead and move that to there as well. Notice that these can converge along the same paths. And then I'm going to make one more task that says enter promotion into system with modified pay. So a separate task depending on that output. I'll make it a task again. I'm going to assign it again to my good buddy Jackson. If you're watching this at home, Jackson, actually, I'm kind of wondering why you would watch this at home. So go ahead and check that, wait for task to be completed and click on save. So here, right, if it is approved, like, okay, yes, with a modified pay, go to that task. In either case, these have been approved and we're going to drag and drop to that approved step. So, and I may want to go ahead and move that a little bit so that I can see where how all the different paths are going. So here's what we have built out. The choice, it's manager, it really shouldn't be manager approval, it should be manager's choice. So go ahead and do manager's choice. Approved, it's going to go, okay, enter the promotion and then approve. Approve, but with requested pay. Okay, then, well, HR is going to review the requested pay. And then depending on if that's approved or rejected, a different task will be created and then go out to approve. Otherwise, no, we're going to send them a notification. Too bad, so sad. Try again next time. And then it's going to kick out rejected. One real quick bit as well, under workflow, if you click on details, you can choose the approval status and the rejection status. So if I want to cancel the overall ticket, when it gets kicked out of rejection, I can do that. If I wanted to go ahead and just close it because it's been completed on approval, I can go ahead and do that too. Maybe it's going to need to be in process because there's more work to be done. I would use these approval and rejection statuses to go ahead and set that upon exit. If I was curious about whether or not my logic was good on any of these, maybe any sort of circular redundancies or just infinite loops, I would go ahead and click on File and do Validate. And I see I get no errors and no warnings, which is nice. That's always good to be validated. And when I am done, I can go ahead and save and check in, because right there it is. So just to go ahead and show that again, if I click on File, Check Out, it says checked out to Mark Flores. So if Michelle wanted to dive in there and make some modifications to this, she wouldn't be allowed to because it's checked out to me. But as soon as I do File, Save, and Check In, then it's going to remove that, and then she'd be able to go ahead and jump in. So if I close that, I would click on Activate to go ahead and activate the workflow. And that's all there is to it. Lots of power, lots of fun to be had in terms of building out workflows. Any additional questions along the lines of workflow creation, workflow management? I do have a handful of sample workflows in the slide deck in just a little bit, besides the one that I just made. Obviously, I am never going to be asked back into the world of human resources ever again for that, that horrendous display of what people think happens behind the scenes in HR. I used to joke I was the least HR person in HR, and I was not sure why they hired me. So we do have some additional examples on our following slides if you're interested. These won't be reviewed in detail because it can be overwhelming, but reference this slide later on when you're ready to really begin building out workflows. And they're there mainly to be templates, to be examples, to kind of help you begin thinking about how you would or need to begin to build them out yourself. So again, generally things flow left to right and the connections are made via the pipes to the step names. So here is a sample change management workflow. So here we have the first step is actually a condition. It's checking to see if it's a standard change. If it's met, then go here. If it's not met, it's going to go to another condition step. So here's a sample one if you're going to be implementing change management with Team Dynamics. Additionally, here's a sample new hire one. I think especially as you begin to go through this, you'll find that there are some very generic titles and names. It's just meant to kind of show what could be done with a new hire workflow. So first step is a task, configure the net ID, and then go from there. And then the third example that we have here is our computer procurement process. So first of all, does the manager approve of a new computer to be procured? Yes or no? If not, like automatically out, rejected, not going anywhere. If so, well, we need a task for the quote. So go ahead and develop the quote, and then has the quote been approved, and so forth. So Michael has a question. Is there a way to have some of those templates imported into my instance? Unfortunately, no, Michael. I wish there was. It would be really, really nice and handy to be able to have a workflow importer, exporter. Again, I think that would be a great feature request that we should implement sometime soon, but unfortunately not at the moment. It would have made some of my other work a lot more bearable and easier, I'll tell you that much, especially as you get into the on and offboarding one, because I have seen, I can easily see that going to about 20 or so different steps. Sometimes every once in a while, I've seen it go up to 80 to 100. And so it can get a little daunting and overwhelming. It'd be nice to be able to export it out. So, okay, well, here we are. We're getting close to that 1.5 hour mark. Which is going to be my new nickname, hopefully, as long as I continue to remain punctual. So let's go ahead and test your knowledge. So question 1, how does the SLA know when a ticket has been responded to? I know we talked about this, so that makes me feel good because that lets me know that I'm at least covering the stuff that we're going to be quizzing you on. So true or false, you always have to specify a backup resource when you assign a workflow step to a role instead of a person or group. I know we talked about that. 3, where are operational hours configured? Should be an easy peasy slam dunk kind of a question. Lastly, true or false, multiple people can work on workflows at once. And I know I covered that as well. So even if you're not sure, or maybe you don't remember, because it can be a lot of content, go ahead and give it your best shot. And we'll go ahead and talk about it in a few. Just looking to get a little bit of participation from everybody. All right, got a handful of answers in there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Maybe just a couple more, one or two more people. So. Did you hear about the, I was reading the news, Michelle, did you hear about the explosion at the cheese factory in France?
It's possible I did hear about that. Why? What
Yeah.
happened?
Oh, debris was everywhere.
No, that one has been a common one lately. So
Yes,
that one I do remember.
Well, thank you for playing along. I'll be sure to tell Marcus that you deserve a pay raise for putting up with my bad jokes.
I appreciate that.
Yep. I mean, I built the workflow for it, right? Okay, maybe one more person. We're at 50%. I think that's good enough. So let's go ahead. Thank you for everyone who went ahead and participated. Let's go ahead and talk about the results. Question number 1, 100% right. Very, very good. It has to do with the status change. Very, very nice. Well done. A little bit of division on question 2. That's okay. You always have to specify a backup resource when you assign a workflow step to a role. That is true, believe it or not. Yep. So if I was to assign it specifically to Michelle, I wouldn't need a backup. But if I assign it to a role like requester or responsible manager, that is kind of an ambiguous filling. It may not necessarily have a value. User record could be inactivated and not up to date. So I need to have a backup for those scenarios. So the correct answer is true. 100% on number 3, very, very good. It's going to be within your operational hours there. Correct way to go ahead and navigate to that. And then number 4, multiple people can work on workflows at once. Correct answer is actually false. So only one person can work on a workflow at a time. So if I'm working on it, then Michelle can't. But really happy with the results. Very impressed. Thank you, everyone who went ahead and chimed in there and threw your answers out there. I know the big wide world of the internet, sometimes just having a voice can be a little intimidating. So thank you, everybody, for throwing it out there. So what are our next steps? What do we have for you? So configure your, and just as a reminder as well, these are optional configurations. So before you all get worried or overwhelmed, I'm going to start with this bottom bullet. These are optional, but they are nice to have and allow for more automation. So if you know during the course of readiness that this is just not where your focus is, but you've learned some things and maybe you'll implement it later on, I would just say go ahead and jump on in and mark those tasks at 100% complete up there and just say we'll review with consultant or we'll review at a later time, just to let us know that you've read them, you understand what they are. But you don't want to keep these from holding you up from that plan percentage completion. So that said, the action items that you may or may not be skipping are to configure the operational hours. Very, very straightforward. Again, it's just a start time and an end time across Monday through Friday in a time zone. Easy peasy. Configure your SLAs or your service level agreements. So we went ahead and showed how to do one of those. I gave you my best low priority example there. So I would start there if you're not sure where to go. Configure at least one test automation rule in prod. I know I believe it was Adam earlier that had that one about priority to SLA. I think that's a great start. Create a test workflow using at least one approval and one task step. So go ahead and just come up with something, even just to get familiar with it, to see how it works. It's as simple as 1, 2, and then saving it. So not even the number 3. And then discuss any other additional scenarios that may require workflows. There's a lot of different things that you can put on Rails, obviously, depending on whether or not you're just the IT department implementing things. I shouldn't say just the IT department. IT department does so much, but any of the other departments as well, right? Any of the other functional areas or subdivisions within your organization, talk about what could be a good candidate for a workflow. This one takes about 1 to 5 hours, but don't let that daunt you. Don't be the one to be the sole bearer of burden. If you don't need to be, distribute these tasks across your team. Um, let's see. Adam says, one last question. Ha ha ha. That's okay. It doesn't have to be the last question, Adam. I like the questions. It keeps reminding me that I'm not talking into an internet void. So it's good to see these. If I have a team that will be using its own operational hours, is there a way to include Saturday, Sunday? Unfortunately not. The only way to include Saturday, Sunday is to forego operational hours. In those scenarios, what I find is helpful is using not so much automation rules, but sorry, not so much operational hours, but just making sure that I would focus more on making sure that the SLA timers are really well defined, and then just making sure that the SLAs are applied upon ticket creation. It would be really hard to leverage operational hours currently in Team Dynamics with Saturday, Sunday, perhaps again, another feature request. So what I've seen people do, usually if someone's working Saturday and Sunday, is they'll just completely switch off operational hours, or they will try and incorporate that Saturday, Sunday operational time into the Monday, Friday timeframe. So for example, if you're Monday through Friday, let me see here. If you're like 8 to 5, right, but you have 2 5-hour days that you work on the weekends on Saturday and Sunday, incorporating those 10 hours into your 8 to 5 sometimes can distribute those a little bit. But most of the time I find that it would probably be better in that scenario to remove operational hours and set all of your SLAs on a running timer, or at least have maybe weekend only SLAs that don't use operational hours. So you have your midweek. That would probably actually be even better as I talk through this. So regular support desk, Monday through Friday, give them their own set of operational of service level agreements. Make sure to check the use operational hours box. For your weekend crew, I would say give them their own set of SLAs, but don't check use operational hours. I think that would be the best way to handle that. And then of course, you know, they have different standards that they're being held to at that point, but I think that's a really good question. Really good operations-based question. Thank you, Adam, for that. Michael, welcome back, Michael. I see another question here from you. Is there a global admin override if someone forgets to check in a workflow? That is a really good question because I had to do that to Miles just the other day. Sorry to pick on Miles. Miles is a really great guy. I just like picking on him a little bit. So if I jump out here to my, let's see if it's actually still there. My IT tickets, workflows. It was this one in particular. No, it's checked out to me. Michelle, do you want to go ahead and jump into that one? The one that I was just working on in HR, and then I can go ahead and show what that looks like and then jump on to Jason's question.
Sure. Which one was it called?
So in client services, it was in human resources and it was the promotion one.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So I'll get right back to you on that one, Michael, while Michelle sets it up. Jason, respond by seems to be from time of submission. Is resolved by from time of submission or from time of response? That's a good question, Jason. They are both from the same point in time. And this may actually be a really good point to jump out and show you what it looks like on a ticket. So here I am in the TD Next environment here. And I'm just going to go ahead and see if there's a ticket that I can work with in here. I have a, okay, here we go. I'm going to just use this ticket as an example. So you can assign service level agreements. And obviously I would say it's a better practice to use an automation rule or the ticketing type to set default service level agreements. But on a ticket, you can also just assign a service level agreement after the ticket's been created. If you're like, oh, this needs an SLA because we're held responsible with it, you need to manually do it. Under actions, you can do assign SLA. And I'm going to go ahead and pull in that low priority bronze one that I created. And both of those, the respond by and the resolve by, will start from the same time. And I can determine that time here. So when we do it with an automation rule, it's going to be when it's created. So it's always going to be from that creation time. If I wanted to jump in through the ticket itself, I can determine from the current date and time. So if this ticket just got lost and we just now got away with it, we just now figured it out that it got away from us. Maybe we want to give ourselves a little slack, cut ourselves some grace, go ahead and determine the deadlines from the current date and time. Or I can choose to determine it from the time the request was created. When you're using automation rules, this is how it's always going to be because the ticket hasn't even existed yet. When you're working with an SLA in real time and maybe it's not coming in through an automation rule, which is not necessarily a better practice, but you can determine to go ahead and do it from there. So if I do this from here, from the current date and time right now, where I am, so I get to respond by and resolve by these times here on the ticket. That's the SLA that's assigned. If, however, I wanted to go ahead and reassign the SLA and I wanted to do it from the time it was created, I'm probably going to be in really big trouble here. It's always kind of humorous to see how old these are in our SAM. But yeah, so this was due back in January. I really dropped the ball there. I must have been doing something important. So when you're using automation rules, they're both going to start at the same time. It's going to be from the time of creation. Good question, Jason. Good operational functional question there. I really appreciate that. Michael, let me go ahead and show you. So if I jump into the, are you ready? I'm guessing you're ready, Michelle.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Always appreciate your help on these. So if I jump out to the promotion process here, notice that it says forced check-in, right? It says, if I go out to view builder, it's going to show me checked out to Michelle right over here in the upper side. I can't even check it out. That menu option is gone, right? So if I wanted to go ahead and override, obviously, probably would want to message her and say, hey, are you still working on it? But I can go ahead and force check-in. And are you sure you want to force check in the workflow? Go, okay. So now it's been force checked in and I can go ahead and view builder. And she's been kicked out. Loses the changes that she's done, but at least I can work on it now. So again, that's a little rude, right? You'd probably want to have a conversation first before just kicking them out. But if you needed to, then you have a way to do that. So good question, Michael. Christy, hi, Christy. Looks like you have a question here for me. In a workflow, is there a process in place for forwarding an approval assignment to someone else if the originally assigned approval is on vacation, or how would that be handled? So that's a really good question. The way that I managed that when I was juggling, again, my requests as a ticketing admin at the University of Nevada, is I had a report by workflow steps. So those approval steps, you can actually report on. So I generated custom reports that told me if a ticket was sitting on an approval step, and it would show me how long it was sitting on that approval step. So for some of our, request for instructional compensation workflows, right? So someone who's normally an actual like administrative staff member, or someone who's not faculty, staff. Maybe they wanted to also teach a class. That was an instructional process that we had, and they would often just kind of get left behind and they would sit there. So I'd take a look at my report every week. I'd take a look and see how long they were sitting on a particular step, and then I would use that as a cue to go ahead and see if maybe that person was out of the office, maybe an emergency came up. So the short answer to that is I would generate a report according to the workflow steps. So I know we're a little over time, but I'll go ahead and show real quick what that looks like in an IT scenario, because I know it's here. So I have this report here that says awaiting CAB and ECAB approval. And when I run, oh, there's nothing stuck on these steps. There's nothing waiting approval. But if I was to go ahead and edit this report, notice how the workflow step is one of. And so I would use this report to go ahead and build out, let me see, approval, search. Oh, there's a lot of approval. Okay, there it is. So if it is on the CAB approval or the ECAB approval step, then it would appear in that report. That report has 0 results, so there's no tickets on that step, but that was how I managed it, is by reporting on specific workflow steps and then just taking a look at the ticketing age. So good question though, good question. Yeah, there's not an automatic way necessarily to know if someone's out of office or not. So, oh, you're welcome, very welcome. Good question. Yeah, because I had tickets that would sit around for months and people would be teaching the class, but not really gotten paid for it yet. And it's like, well, we need your manager to approve. And I don't know why you're teaching if the manager didn't approve. And nobody's ever dealt with situations like that. I'm sure that's just me. Uh, So then, I forgot where I left off, but I was really happy for all of those questions. Thank you very much for the engagement. I really appreciate it. So action items for you: operational hours, your SLAWs or your service level agreements, at least one automation rule, test a workflow with an approval and a task step, and then discussing those scenarios that require workflows. Again, 1 to 5 hours. Don't be the sole bearer of burden if you don't have to be. Distribute these tasks across your team. Honestly, if you're thinking about workflows anyway, that's not going to be within a sole individual anyway. You'd want to go ahead and talk with the other people who are going to be on the chain for the workflow. So keep that in mind. Couple of really helpful resources are our glossary of terms. So if you see us using some words and you're not sure what those mean, go ahead and check that out. And then all of those different workflow steps and the descriptions, definitely check this out as well if you need a reminder or a refresher, or you just want to dig a little bit deeper on those. That's a really great one that I return to every once in a while. So if you need help updating your action items, we have workshop this week. It is the last workshop of the cycle on Thursday from 1 to 3 Eastern. I'm going to be there, at least I'm planning on being there. So you should too, hopefully. Bring your questions. I like to mockingly call it Stump the Consultant. I was stumped earlier today by Adam. Good job, Adam. But definitely, bring your questions, bring your scenarios, bring your stuff. It's one of the few times where we'll unmute you if you're like, look, this is long, I don't want to type this out, because we want to make sure that we equip you well before we send you off. So log an issue on your implementation project. Definitely go to that site if you haven't already, to go ahead and submit an issue. They come to all of us consultants here on the team. And if you need a reminder, we have that KB on how to do it. Definitely update your action items. Once your action items are complete, mark them as 100%. We have a report that runs on this, and this is how we know when to introduce you to your consultant. It could be me, it could be Miles, it could be Jackson. Any of the people who have been teaching readiness this cycle could be your consultant. Again, because this is optional, if you are not going to implement any of these anytime soon, but they're nice to know, just jump on in there, set them as complete, and then put that "we'll discuss with consultant" or we'll review at a later phase, something to let us know that you have at least reviewed and understood, but it's not going to be something that you're going to want to do in the short term. Lastly, sometimes the best email is really a conversation. So if you want to go ahead and chat with us, if your team you or your team wanted to schedule some time with us, use our Calendly link. That just kind of randomly gets shuffled out to us, and a little bit of a round robin kind of style. So we just ask that you have a issue ID on the request. So that way, whoever gets it can go ahead and take a look at the issue ID. Just helps us come a little bit prepared, makes the most value out of everyone's time on the call. So that is all I have today. That is it. You've all been great. Again, love the questions. Happy to answer those. Sometimes you can't take in new information until you get answers to the stuff that you've got floating around in your head. So anything else that you can ask of me? Anything else that needs repeated? Kind of feel a little bit like a game show host. Well, I always want to thank you, Michelle, for helping out behind the scenes with everything. You always make this a lot easier for me, and you laugh at my jokes, which is really the hardest part of of any of these. So if there's no more questions, I think we'll go ahead and consider it good for now. Sorry to go a little bit over your time expectations, but I'm mainly really glad that we got some of those other questions answered, because that'll help with your planning and your implementation. So until next time, everyone have a great rest of your day. I've enjoyed chatting with you all and look forward to working with you at a future session.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a good
Michelle.
day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.